everybody? Welcome to episode 14 of Spike Drop KickedTripod here with Volamel. Yiska is out, but we found another European to come fill a spot.
Hey. Representing the
It's
scene.
always we did the same thing on Tactical Crouch. As Yiska was gone on Wednesday, or he's gonna be, and then we had Reinforce on. So always have to have
I saw
the represent.
Gotta fill it.
So, anyways,
that one's on my download list. Like that episode is on my download list to watch, like, or to listen to even, because I try to go walks frequently, so I'm just like, right, download like all of the different podcasts and stuff. So that one, I think, certainly is like somebody that wants to do like talent related stuff in Valorant. I think how he represented data and stuff and how to use it, I think is just like must listen to, I suppose it would be.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's a long one. I even broke it up into two because it was so long. But I think it was a really good one. By the way, that new voice you're hearing is none other than RyanCentral from HitScan. It's just HitScan, right? It's like that's okay.
It's not HitScan Central or
it's not
your
HitScan. Your HitScan. Your HitScan watch.
Fresh.
HitScan watch Central.
A lot of people complained about the name originally because it was really basic, but I just think it's clean,
Simple, eloquent.
Yeah,
it's clean.
The whole plan to begin with was to start HitScan as a fresh new channel to cover like the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare. It was like Battlefield, all like it was around that time that we're like, there's a lot of FPS games coming out, but it never really happened. And ironically, we were considering just rebranding it before Project A and Valorant was announced, but as soon as that hit, it was like, right, I think that's like a telltale sign of where we want to take the direction of this channel, really. Because I don't think it's like general just FPS games. I think it's more about like what Overwatch and Valorant do so well is just the class-based interaction. Like, yeah, you have to have the mechanics, but you also need to know what your role is on a team. And as somebody from like a football or soccer background, like that's been super, super important to me. Like if you're playing defensive midfielder, your skills and talents and the way that you think about the game has to be different to other people, right? So seeing that in Overwatch was always enticing and still is. But Valorant is just like a new, fresh thing when you actually see the lurker and the support role from Counter-Strike, for example, play out in embodiment of actual agents. Like Cypher lurkers in this game, like Pora, for example, are just so much fun to watch when they're on attack because they just do the stupidest stuff. It's just unreal. They just go on crazy flanks like Get Right used to in Counter-Strike.
Dang, dude, just dropping the knowledge right off the bat. I love it. So it's great because we did a little bit of Valhalla together, Ryan, back in the day. Spent a little time together and got to watch Party Parrots, I think, was there. Were you there for the week that Party Parrots was there and Fabrican?
I did one NA week and one EU week, and I think the only feedback I gave to the guys that were running it really was just the EU weeks were just so much better. There was so much more entertaining, and ironically, I think it's the other way around now. I think NA knows how to put on like a show, but the EU week 3 and week 4 events with Party Parrots and Royals and Need More DM, Too Good for LAN it was so much fun because there was like that camaraderie, I suppose, between the teams because they all knew each other. It made it super interesting to watch.
It was a ton of fun, and so we invited Ryan onto the show today because we just haven't caught up in a while since you kind of rebrand or moved over, created the new channel with HitScan, and really fun channel, by the way. That's just youtube.com/HitScan, right?
Yeah.
So make sure to go check that out. Of course, for our show, you can follow us and hang out every Friday at noon at twitch.tv/KickedTripod. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/SpikeDrop and youtube.com/SpikeDrop. Big thanks to Blue for our intro and outro music, by the way. I think I forgot last week, but thanks again, Blue. Bye, love you. Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about the things. No real news this week, huh? It's just a lot of esports stuff this week.
A few signings here and there. I think we obviously have it in the notes of like Renegades making some moves, Complexity making some moves. A little, I'd say underwhelming, but I'm very happy to be wrong on that front. I was kind of underwhelmed with like Immortals moves, but again, that's my ignorance because look at what they're doing. So we'll have to see exactly what comes from them. I think both teams will probably be, I believe both teams will be at the PAC Invitational. Let me double check that on the second monitor. Renegades and Complexity are both invited. So yeah, it'll be fun. I think that tournament in general is going to be the kind of spiritual successor to the T1 Nerd Street Gamers one. So other than that, yeah, not a ton of news, which I'm not necessarily mad at because we can really kind of pick Ryan's brain on some of these tournaments.
Well, in the last couple of weeks has been just going through the patch notes like for 45 minutes. And that's... Yeah.
So how do you want to complain about the Guardian? I don't know. Let's like figure out how we want to complain about Viper this week. I don't know. Does she need help? Yes. Next. Yes. Yeah, it's... Yeah.
Well,
how many times do you want to just beat that over the listener's head, right? Like it's...
Let's talk about some of these signings then. All right. Ninjas in pajamas.
Yes.
Finally rounded out their roster, signing kind of a big part of the core from Hip Hip Hip. For those who follow Overwatch, the Frenchman for the Eternal, right? He is French and he was on the Eternal, right? Like that was one of the big things. So they sign Kriya, Hip, and Feareth, right? How do you say that? Do you say Feareth or Feareth?
I think it's Fearoff, yeah.
Fearoff.
I haven't had it corrected, so I'm assuming that's it. But that is just, there's a lot of that. Just like, how do I say your name? Especially when you get to like some of the Hungarian names and suddenly like the Russian CIS region. I've become like because the people I know people that have done like the Ignition events in EU, and two people on two separate occasions were like, how do you say SSK's name? Because it's like 7SSK7, and I'm like, it's just SSK. But it's like, it's just a lot of examples like that, I suppose, where I'm just like, oh, I should have probably asked somebody how you say this name in particular, because a lot of the time we just don't get it wrong.
Yeah. Oh, so you don't want to just like willingly get it wrong, but yeah.
It's
being corrected by Twitch chat is always like the worst, like,
that's
culling, I suppose, when it comes to... Because I like I thought it was Ty Jean that plays for Need Mod DM, but it's like Tigerne, I think it is Tigerne, and it's like I asked a player that played for Need Mod DM, do you say Ty Jean? And he said yes. And so I told Bok that, I think, and then Bok was saying it on the We Play thing, and Twitch chat were like, it's not Ty June, it's Tigerne. And he's like, what the hell, Ryan? Like, why did you say it was that? And I was like, well, it was one of the
That's what I was told.
So it was just like a massive troll from Crazy Deer to like, yeah, that's exactly how you say his name, and it's just something completely...
Yeah.
Oop, sorry, just Discord just reset on me.
Oh, yeah.
I think I crashed.
Yeah, I think it was...
I don't know what that was.
I lost everybody, and it switched the cameras, I think. Oh, never mind. It switched them back.
Is that
okay.
fixed it?
We're back. We're okay.
We're good.
I don't know why I did that. That's the first time he's ever done that for me.
The EU pronunciation gods were not happy with that conversation.
Hungarian servers.
They wanted to nip that one in the butt.
Hey.
Yep.
Yeah, like I think the Ninjas in Pajamas roster is super interesting. Might I add that they have won the first round against G2 in the We Play event, which is literally happening right now. So they look much better than people gave it credit for. And I suppose the biggest complaint with this team when you look at it is just there's a lot of players that only play one thing and a lot of players that don't really play much at all. Like Looker, you see, is like the Jet player. They've been shoehorned to play Sage with the Operator, which is like really frustrating to watch in some cases. Cray is probably one of the best players in the world, just in general, but can only play Omen. Fearoff is pretty decent, but can only really play Sova. Hip is okay across the board. He's really good on Reyna, but Reyna isn't really good. So that's a bit of a problem. And then Rhyme is just kind of like, I don't really know what the NA example would be, but if you're looking for like a UK like soccer example, it's like James Milner. Like he's the kind of player that does consistently well, but nobody really talks about him. Like I'm trying to think of like Overwatch examples where there's just like a consistent player that never really pops off. You know that they're always going to do their role, and that's just going to be that. Kind of like any main tank or off tank player. You never really sing their praises, but when you miss them and like they're not in the roster or they get traded away, you're like, I really miss having this player. And that's how I describe Rhyme on this roster too. It's just like, it doesn't really make much sense. So you get a lot of like round peg, square hole kind of things going on.
Like Rhyme to me, with the way that you're kind of describing it, it feels a lot like Drone on TSM, where like you don't notice him a lot of the time. He's not like the flashiest player, but like he's that rock that they can kind of go back to. And I think that's how he was billed for me. going back to like the Prodigy core during Vitality. Like absolutely popped off, like had some great performances, and like is this rock for this core moving into NIP. I think the big question for me now, looking at some of the we play stuff, is like who's really going to kind of main op. Is it Lucker? Is it Fearoth? Is there going to be like a testing ground on like who's doing what? Because it looks like Fearoth still is picking up the op. Lucker still seems to be picking up as well. So like, where is that fitting in? I think a lot of that same question can be pinned on some of these other rosters too, where it's like, why is G2 not giving Artis the op at like most of the time? I will say, I think Mixwell has had a couple like good days, but I think a lot of this uncertainty is still like bubbling up around a lot of these teams where like nothing's really set in stone. I will say, not entirely. I'm cautiously optimistic with this team. I just need a little bit more. They have like bits and pieces of success. Like 3 of these players did well here, and then like the Prodigy core did good, and then like Hip 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 did good. So it's like once you put them all together and you give them some time, like what really can they achieve? And obviously with taking a map off of G2, like that's no small feat. So potential is very high. A lot of firepower on this team, and yeah, excited. I think this is definitely like a plus over their former roster. Would you kind of agree with that, Ryan?
I'd say so, but I also think that like you have them, a lot of them showing up now. Like Ninjas in Pajamas, when they first came in, they looked decent, but gradually they just fell off. And I don't think it was like, Bonker and Tenor weren't good enough. You had Digadog, who was like in New Zealand, I think, that was on that roster because he was part of the Paladins roster. They literally transferred their world champion winning Paladins roster over to Valorant, and just pound for pound, and Bird, one of their fifth, became the coach. Diggity couldn't play because, of course, he was in New Zealand or Australia, whichever one it was, and couldn't get across because of the COVID-19. Alex disappeared. I just don't think it was the game for him. Tenor and Bonker were on that roster when it disbanded. Bonker's still playing with Bonk, and Bonker looking pretty good right now. Like, they have a really cool roster around them, and it's like full Swedish. Looks really strong, could be like a contender for the future. But Tenor, again, has just dropped off. So I think it was just they signed the good players, but to the wrong game. And those players were like, I don't really want to grind this game at all. They weren't interested, which is fair enough. But I think it kind of screwed players like Bonker, who in the G2 tournament looked really good on the Cypher role that he was playing. But now I feel like when you look at Bonk, you go, oh, these are the wash players that were on Ninjas in Pajamas, because you had Yassine in there coming in to sort of help. You had Melonhead. You had, I think, Safe played a couple of times. Like, the roster on Bonk in general is just like, people will see them as the washed-up Ninjas in Pajamas players, when they could be just as good, if not better, as the Ninjas in Pajamas roster now. So it's a super interesting scenario to be in. But I would just hate for this, like, Bonk roster to get a lot of flack. But back on track, this actual new roster that they have has been doing surprisingly well. You could say that they came second in the Vitality tournament because they were under Prodigy with near enough the same players. They just didn't have Kreia and Fearoff. Instead, they had Pora and Turco. Pora was just insane as well. Like, he was just precognition. Like, he just knew how to play the game and nobody knew how to play up against him. But they came second, and then added in these two players. Like, they're undefeated so far in We Play and currently beating out G2, even though G2 2-1 behind currently on Ascent. I'll like live track the score as we go on.
Okay, good.
So people can like live through it. Live through us vicariously.
We'll live tweet it.
Hip 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 on its own, the 3 players joining from Hip 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 have done really well too. They won 3 Take the Thrones in a row. They beat Fabrican in one of those. They beat Fish 123 in one of those. 2-0, by the way. Like, this is a team that, or the Hip 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 was a team anyways, that has put up results against some of the strongest talent in EU that we've seen so far. Is it just kind of a question then on how these two parts are going to come together, with NIP doing okay, like kind of good, not great kind of thing, and then Hip 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 doing really great and having some really impressive results, but maybe just kind of lacking the overall like tier, like the larger tournament mainstays?
I think it's kind of 2 things where it's like, okay, what does this team look like now that they're coming together? I think Hip did a little hand waving on Twitter where he's like, this tournament's going real long, guys. Like, Vitality is taking forever. We don't have any practice under our belt. So, like, I think we can take a second place and, like, count that as a W.
Yeah.
So, like, what does this team look like now that they've actually, like, formed? They can actually getting into practice and, like, really get in the nitty gritty of things to, like, figure out who's playing what, where, and work on that. And also, like, EU starting to, like, actually come alive. You know, you have teams like G2 coming out. I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Party Parrots actually, like, got a roster, but like got an organization, like an org kind of tapped them and were like, you guys are actually doing well, and you have been doing well for a number of months now. We're going to give you, you know, a trial and, you know, move you on. Something the CIS region, hopefully they do get that, because they're definitely good enough, and I think they have like a pretty interesting style. But to Nip, it's getting this roster and letting it breathe and growing and what that looks like, and also like playing within like a new Europe where it's like, okay, you have all these banger teams coming out left, right, and center. How do you measure up to them?
So if we had to then just kind of take a look, now that Nip is in the fold, they're playing G2 right now. Like, I think there's, especially for people who are more casual listening, they understand how in flux everything is, but they also want some sort of like foundation to kind of like grasp onto. So as we analyze these different teams and different players, we can kind of understand and assess where those are. So where would you guys put, like, on like a power ranking level, which we know from Overwatch is so valuable, on like a power ranking level, where would you put these guys in EU as a team?
They could be top 2. They could be number 1. I think if they're the first to actually beat G2, they can. I think when it comes to this kind of thing, I think a lot of people are kind of like, why do you do? Because I tried to do weekly power rankings of the team, and I feel like, you know, power rankings could be a very divisive topic, and I would certainly hold my hand up and say that, like, a lot of the time these rankings would objectively be wrong in some cases. Just, you know, how they're doing in scrims, I obviously don't know. Movements on teams, like this team might look a lot better when they had this player. I think it's very early to be doing like power rankings. I sort of agree. I think it was Brandon Sideshow that said it on their podcast, like, it is too early, but I think it's a great way to not only get people into the scene when it's like, all right, this is how G2 are faring right now, but Party Parrots are a really good team, and people go in, all right, well, what should we play? Oh, Party Parrots, Ryan mentioned these guys were pretty good. Like, it just adds context to everything that you're watching, and then suddenly it's like, oh, no, Pinky's beating Party Parrots. Like, no, Pinky's not meant to be as good of a team. I'm going to cheer for these guys as they're the underdog. So I would say I'd comfortably put Ninjas in Pajamas, like, certainly within the top 5, regardless of how they do in this event. They could be number 1 if they beat G2. Totally. But the fact of the matter, and this is the thing with G2 and Ninjas in Pajamas, and not really to the same extent the new Prodigy lineup, is because these, well, certainly not the new Prodigy lineup as they went out disastrously in WePlay, but the new Ninjas in Pajamas, the new G2, they haven't lost yet, and so it's kind of like they have this Mario Kart immortality effect. Like, they have the music playing every time they're like in game, just because exactly, like, nothing can really touch them right now, and even if it does, it doesn't really matter. But like in 2 months' time, 4 months' time, when they start to lose a bit more and look a bit more mortal, they're just going to be in amongst the likes of Party Parrots and Fabrican and those kind of teams. I don't think there's much between G2 and Party Parrots or G2 and Fabrican, but really, Ninjas in Pajamas at the Vitality event and G2 played with no fear, because really, they're signed. They don't need to worry. And even Prodigy, especially, doesn't matter if they lose, they're not part of a team. They're just looking to, like, individually show off as much as possible, right? So, in short, Ninjas in Pajamas look right now to be like a top 2 team, but they could drop off the face of the earth in like 2 months' time, 3 months' time, when suddenly they do have stuff to play for. They have like majors coming up, as an example. They have to keep their place in the squad because things are looking super competitive, much like the old Ninjas in Pajamas roster, right? Like, that's why teams like Fabrican and stuff are struggling right now, because they have the almighty climb of, we need to do well in this tournament or we're not going to get signed and we'll have to disband. That's a big psychological weight.
It was a shame that they actually didn't make it to WePlay. Like, definitely was a team that kind of like got the nod to like qualify, and fortunately didn't. Kind of sad to see. But in regards to like top teams in Europe, one team kind of dodged a lot of what you were saying, and I'm interested to see what you have to say on Fish's new roster with Scream. Where do you feel like they're sitting right now? Because I feel like they could be at the top. It could be like this three horse race, but a level of uncertainty kind of clouds this roster. But would you kind of agree with that?
I would. I think that this is the firm example. Fish 123 won everything until they lost Ardis, and then suddenly the mentality changes. Because Fish 123, I think at some point we're just kind of like, we need to lose at some point. You know, we need to lose because for organizations to want to recruit us, we need to show that ability to kind of, all right, we lost this tournament, we lost this series, we're going to come back stronger. And I think that, you know, Astralis is like the perfect example of that in Counter-Strike. They were the best team in the world, not because they won everything, but they won everything, then fell into a slump, went back to the drawing board, didn't change up their roster, just changed up how they played in their mentality, and then came back and won everything again. That's a sign of a great team. Fish 123, because they lost Ardis, they have this like big weight on their shoulders now to perform, because if they don't, people are going to be like, oh, Ardis is the only worthwhile player, and then let's hypothetically speaking, or allegedly, Team Liquid won't sign us. You know, like that's the big pressure that they have on them at the moment. I do like what they've done. Like, because I casted the 2 games, because they've only played 2 games, 2 best of 3s, since Ardis left between now and we play. First one was in Take the Front against Hip Hip Hip. They lost. They looked pretty bad. The same with E-Pulse. They played against Party Pirates, which are 2 very tough teams to play against, to be fair. And again, they look bad. All times, Scream was playing Reyna, and it looked like they were trying, like I was saying with Ninjas in Pajamas, I'm sort of repeating myself, or it's going back in circles, because a lot of teams have this problem. They were trying to like shoehorn Reyna and Scream into the position and role that Ardis played. But Reyna isn't an operating character. Scream isn't an operator player. So there's like all of these issues of, oh, we're just going to try and get Scream to play that same position. They're just different players. They can't really fulfill that role. So the difference between those games where they look terrible and now is that they've changed up their roster, well, changed up their lineup and composition of agents that they play. Scream is now playing Breach, which actually works out pretty damn well. He plays that role pretty well. Soulcast isn't a raise one trick anymore. He's been playing a lot of Silver and looks good there. Eccles has not only moved over from the Breach to the Brimstone, but to be an operator player, which has actually gone really well. And what you have to remember is that Eccles is only like 19, 20 years old. So he has the time and ability to learn how to play a completely different role and also like IGL at the same time. So I've got to commend Fish 123 for like changing up how they play, and all of that practice and all of that time and effort they've put in over the last 3 weeks that they've been missing in action is evident. So I think they could still be a top team. If Team Liquid are thinking about signing them, I would still recommend, yeah, they're good. They're not terrible because Ardis left them. The other 4 players are really good, and you have Scream on your roster. But that's worth picking up in itself.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so like I think they're a lot better than I maybe gave them credit for, certainly after the 2 best of 3 games that I mentioned where they lost. But
well, I think that definitely should weigh on like their ranking. I definitely think that you can in one hand kind of criticize like, hey, dropping artists not the best look in terms of results, but now that you found a way to work Scream into this roster and you have gone through that shuffle, things have looked better. I just, caught some of the We Play, their game. I don't even remember who it was against, but Scream's dropping crazy numbers on Ascent. Like, this team seems to have found a way to gel, and it's starting to like make sense. I think for me personally, at least, they need a little bit more on top of this. I don't think just one good event's just gonna like maybe Scream's on today. Maybe that's just what this is. But if they can do it again at the next one, then it's like, okay, Fish is back.
I think the key thing there as well is they knocked out Party Pirates. And Party Pirates were the best team in Europe like a week ago. That's what I kind of mean about like the whole, it's very turbulent right now, because G2 are hot right now. In 2 weeks time, we might be just laughing at how washed they are, like that's kind of like the more fun part of it, but it's also very frustrating to get a gauge on how these teams play. I would say more so in EU than NA. You have a general, like TSM lost in Pulse, for example, against Cloud9. Nobody thinks that they are like out of the top 5 or even top 2 teams in the region. It just happens, you know, like they run into those kind of games. How they respond now is going to be super important, but generally it doesn't impact them too much. I would say sort of similar for somewhat like Party Pirates. So the fact that Fish 1-2-3 has come back into the fray and beaten a team that beat them pretty handedly in a tournament before this, I think is a shining example of like how much they're still able to bring into the scene. If it was an NA team, they would be snapped up by now, because I feel like all of the NA orgs are getting involved, just picking up anybody that they can. No offense to the teams, because I really liked Code 7, for example, but like the top 5 teams, 3 of them now in EU are not signed. It's just G2, NIP. The fact that we may never see Fabrican or Party Pirates signed, because teams don't really want to pick up full rosters apparently, and they want to have like streamer players that have a big following. Like, I don't know if do you allow swearing on this podcast?
Yeah.
Well, like, they can just fuck off. Like, I can't stand it. Like, it does my head in, because I understand, as a content creator, I understand how much influence and impressions is important. My girlfriend calling me now, like she's telling me off for swearing, but like it's the whole like, if you get the best players, if you get signed Zipan and he pops off like we know we can, and he doesn't have that weight on his shoulders that he's like, do I stay with this team or do I take an individual offer for some other organization that's trying to poach content, which I don't know if they are. I'm just taking a mad assumption that that's the case, because let's be honest, it probably is happening. Zipan can relax, he can play, Fabrican could play without that weight on their shoulders to be signed. They could just play some really good Valorant. Zipan pops off. He becomes a really solid player, much like Wardell has for TSM. Then he gets like Twitch viewers. You know what I mean? Like he becomes the good player to then get that clout. You don't sign players for clout to hope then that they're going to be good. That's just like, it doesn't work that way. I don't think you need to like.
Doesn't stop people from trying. I will say this: they definitely try that.
It's just kind of obnoxious, because it's the same old rigmarole that esports has had for, I don't know, ever. It's like, cool, we got the big streamer, time to put him in a team. Ah, dang, they didn't do good. How could we have known? Drat. Next.
I mean, and we've talked about this before, right? And I think I get what you're saying. I understand, and you're right, but you're wrong. But you're right. But so, from a purely results oriented goal from an organization, yes, you're 100% right. But especially early on in esports life, the goal is not just to like field the best team early, because that's probably the least like profitable time, especially from like a results perspective. You're playing weeklies for $500, maybe a $5,000 one there, and every once in a while you see a 10K up there. But instead, it's a lot about familiarity. It's a lot about signing. If you sign 5 players that show promise, if you sign one really big player, I'm going to use an example. This example doesn't totally apply, but it's just like, think of a household name value. Sinatra. You sign Sinatra.
Okay.
Great. Sinatra, who knows if he'll ever be a true top tier 1 Valorant player. But how many young future top tier 1 Valorant players want to play with Sinatra? We don't know. You get them in there, you don't end up maybe keeping Sinatra long term, or they transition to a streamer or something else. But now you've signed these 3 players who played besides Sinatra, and boom, you've started to build out your roster, and you didn't have to sacrifice like short-term views and stuff on your Valorant content because you have Sinatra. Right. And so like there is this aspect of this long game in play is where it's like it's a little bit like preseason-esque, right? Where the only goal is not, when you go and play a preseason game, is the goal to win. Sure, there's aspects of it, and I would say more so than a preseason game, but less so than a full regular season game. Where we have a fleshed out esports scene. So I don't dislike or think that organizations who are just signing big streamers are like somehow like oblivious to what they're doing. I know of a couple of cases where that might be. I just think that there's just a little bit more on play, because ultimately the org succeeds not really directly by results, but by the views and engagement and advertising and sponsorships and whatever else that comes from partly results, as well as social media following of your players, as well as the engagement with your YouTube channel or whatever else. So I think, I don't know. That's a long rant to say, like,
it's not inherently bad to do that. I agree, especially like early in a game's life cycle. I get it. I think just in terms of like general esports history as a whole, I feel like it's very short-sighted. You probably want to get a core that's good, help grow them, let them grow, and you still get the best of both worlds.
Do you feel confident? I don't think it needs to be one or the other. Do you feel confident that you could grow a core early? Maybe not even this early, but 2 months ago. Do you feel confident that you could have had a core and grown them, and they would be a 100%. Top 2 to 3?
Yep. Immortals.
I was just gonna say Immortals. Yeah.
You can do this. It's not at esports where it was. You're starting to get people that you can trust. Coaches and general managers that have like genuine experience building and like testing and figuring out their eye for things. And while that might not be the most optimal eye for Valorant or for a different title, you can kind of put them in a position to succeed and say, hey, here you go. Here's the budget. Go ahead and do open trials, build a team. You get Immortals. You get a team. You get a kind of a tier 2 team that you could just sign.
Was hardly even a thing 2 months ago.
Who was hardly a team?
Immortals.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They built that team.
But I'm saying, like, what's a better way to say this?
I think as well, when you have players like, let's say Yiska for 100 Thieves.
Sure.
If he underperforms, that's a difficult like mountain to move.
Totally is.
Or even the players on high ground that were part of that roster, maybe Yiska decides like, oh, I don't like Venerated, for example, like I don't think he's very good enough. Then the other 3 members of high ground might be like, actually no, like we think he's pretty good. Like we're on his side of things. So that's a bit of a nightmare. Like, granted, you could just move Yiska over to a streamer and have him like sort of retire in that way, but maybe he doesn't want to, and then suddenly you have to like work out how to move this massive brand of a player. Immortals, JC Stanny is a prime example of that recently. Maybe they weren't sure on him individually as a player. Maybe he wanted to play another role and couldn't do that within the team, which I think is more likely what happened. It's fine. Put him on the bench, try out some other people. And then JC Stanley's like, actually, no, can I come back? Like, I'll play this different role. We'll switch things around and be somewhere happy. And it's happened pretty seamlessly. There's been no friction. There's been no problems. And Immortals haven't lost any sleep over trying to sort out this team and this roster and change up exactly what's going to happen there. So, like, that's kind of like my vibe on it. Like, for Breaking, to an extent, like, let's say Latex, for example, just doesn't want to play anymore or can't really fulfill that role. It's not going to be too hard for Breaking. Have had to do that in the past anyway. They dropped Nicola and got in Zipan. So I think there's a lot of teams where you could do that for, but I think if you sign, I don't know, CNED, which has been the rumored player for Fnatic, for example, they're looking into signing like a Turkish roster. What if CNED's just not as good as like Pora, Turco, Mites, some other like Turkish players, and suddenly you have him just sort of like signed on a really expensive contract. He has requirements, and again, you can move him over to a streamer, but it just seems like a lot of effort and a lot of money spent in order to get a bit more clout on Twitch and YouTube and all that stuff. It just doesn't. I think it's more like
it translates to millions of dollars. Like it's not like I get what you're saying, and I totally I don't actually even disagree with it really, and I think that it's not without its own inherent risk reward structure, right? Like in the same way, what happens if you sign 5 kids who don't, turn out and they don't end up, doing that great. And now you kind of lost your chance to be Together We Are Terrific, right? You lost your chance to be one of those small teams that, punch above their weight as far as every other thing goes. I think each side is going to have their advantages and disadvantages. I don't agree with Joe that the one is more or less risk laden than the other. Like I think that well, I would say I don't agree that. Yeah, I don't. I think that it's pretty obvious by the way that teams move and formate and formulate their teams is that there is a value in establishing a singular established presence early on for a lot of these organizations. Immortals is a great example of an exception, but it's also a team where when you tell me Immortals, and this is more from like, I mean, if anyone who's listened to the podcast, I'm the dumb guy. I'm sorry. If somebody else who's smarter than me comes on and wants to push the buttons, awesome. They can come do that. But I'm kind of the dumb guy when it comes to these things. And when you say Immortals and stuff, I go, yeah, JC Stanny's on that, right? And then,
sure.
Where did they finish? Where did they do? Where have I seen them on social media? Where have I? And I honestly, I can't answer that for you. And that's not the end of the world because the scene hasn't formed and blossomed yet either.
Exactly.
So you've got that aspect of it, but at the same time, you do lose those early adopters of your of your organization and being invested in following and watching your organization. You also kind of lose the ability now is like, how easy is it now for Immortals to pivot and sign a larger roster? And not even a larger roster, but like a singular player who wants to come and build with, like, let's say Immortals finish 12th to 16th every time or whatever. How much easier now is it to bring on a Hiko or a Tens or somebody who can bring that in, right? Like, so there's a risk there, I think.
I won't argue with that. I think most things in life definitely have some sort of risk attached to them. Where do you both kind of sit on the idea of the idea that Cloud9 is taking, where it's like they haven't necessarily signed a complete roster. They have gone through some scouting. I'd say incredibly painfully slow, rigorous scouting. Have a core that they continuously play around with Tens, Reckless, Mitch, Shinobi, all these people.
Mitch is official now, by the way, for any listeners
which is
there.
good. Thankfully, I've been calling for this kid to be signed. He feels like the only other person on this roster that like consistently does something along with Tens, which is great for them. And we'll get to their kind of win over TSM in a little bit.
Sure.
But in regards to like building rosters early that don't necessarily have like impactful, super like strong name value, did we know Tens like 2 months ago? I think just starting out, kind of playing on some of these like streamer teams with, the early Valorant, space. And now you're seeing C9 be another one of those kind of cores that's like, okay, we're building something from scratch. It doesn't have to be streamer based.
I don't know the size. I don't know the size of Tens before Valorant. As far as like, I know he's got like probably about 40,000 followers on Twitter right now, if I had to guess, and not check at this exact moment. I have no idea how many of those came post Valorant versus pre Valorant, but that's still like, in the grand scheme of like big content creators and stuff, like that's not a huge size for sure.
It's more of like a general thing that I hope changes, where at the start of a game we see more teams start to genuinely get interested in esports rather than like content. The word clout carries a lot of negative connotation, but I think it definitely sums up like the idea of like getting making a name. Other ways there, you're getting millions of dollars in seed funding throughout, your history in other esports. So it's, I could understand that if you're a new org, if you're a Sentinels, okay, like I get it. Like you gotta build and that's how you build. Okay, that's fine. But when you're a Cloud9, when you're a TSM, I think that's, what you get. You get the not the right way. There is no right way. Like everything, like you said, like everything has its merits. But it's when I look at like a team like Code 7 kind of like falling under and being like, okay, I guess we're gonna get signed from Built for Gamers. It's like, where's the rest of these orgs like coming in? Like they deserve to be signed. What are we doing? So it's this learning that I think we still have to do, and I think that we will hopefully do at some point. And we'll get away from like the streamers and like when you see a good team, you should sign.
I think that's happening a lot more like in the EU. Like I think there's more pressure building on orgs to sort of take particular teams like it's cool to see in NA like the different mixes of how rosters are picked up, like the FaZe Clan individual like cherry picking of players, same with Immortals. And then you have stuff like the high ground roster mostly being signed. You of course have Together We Are Terrific going to Envy wasn't it? There's been so many now, and like obviously all of Code 7 going to BBG. It's nothing like that is happening in the EU. It's just like cherry picking players. Like you have this Prodigy roster that has like that's just lost, by the way, against Bonk, which says enough, really. I feel. You have this roster with like Law on it, Pipson, who is an incredible player. Luzu, Chihuahua, I think was on it too. They're just ultimately, you feel like that roster has been put together by Prodigy to sell off to another organization that's interested, right? Like, you know, the rosters aren't involved like Fnatic, Vitality,
Sounds like the contender structure.
Yeah, right. It's just like Prodigy are just trial running teams, almost putting the rosters together and having a very lax approach to trialing that talent. But would you rather have Fnatic or Vitality sign them or Fabrican? Like, what makes the most sense? Well, still Fabrican. So it's like, it's such a weird approach when you have rosters holding out to have like a star player like Scream on a roster, which makes a lot of sense. It works out quite nicely for Fish 123. But also, would I rather sign Scream or Ardis? Who's got the bigger Twitch following? Yeah, Scream. Who's the biggest following in general? Yeah, it's going to be Scream still because of all of his history in Counter-Strike. Who has the brighter future? Ardis, without a shadow of a doubt. He could become much bigger. He could be a face of European Valorant in a way that we've not seen anybody else really become. Same with Mixwell. Like, that's, you know, projected him to a new level of Twitch stardom, I suppose it would be, in a similar way that Hiko has. But it doesn't mean that, like, Mixwell is the only shining talent on that roster that can grow their own Twitch following. It isn't that at all. But, like, Pife, Patty Tech, like, these players, like, they stream to a couple of hundred people. Same amount of people at Zipan and stuff stream to when they're playing, like, even if it's, like, Valorant Pro Division. So I wish that, like, organizations wouldn't have this really just cherry-picking approach, because I don't think it works. Just generally, I don't think it works, really. Like,
I do wonder...
Teams like Fabrica, like Navi signing Party Parrots would be exceptional. But Party Parrots are exempt from this because they have Angel. Like, Angel is that star player. He has a stream, he has a following, he has all of this stuff. But, like, Fabrican is the only team that people are sort of sat there going, why has nobody signed them? And I think there is a very likely scenario where they never get signed. They just can't keep up with stuff going on at the moment. Individual players, like pretty much all of them, could get individual offers for other organizations. The roster gets pulled apart, and that would be super upset. Yeah, it'd be heartbreaking, and I think it would be a huge blow to the scene, because the scene loves Fabric, and even people that don't watch the European scene know this team, and they're like, oh, why has nobody signed them yet? Like, these guys are really good. Need Mod DM, another example of just a team that's come out of nowhere that has a pretty big fan base, or a building fan base. Sure. More so than just putting random players together that might have a bit more of a Twitch following and hoping that they somehow do better. Like, I just think having that approach a little bit in the NA scene, as example, yeah, cool. When you have full teams being picked up, yeah, great. A good mix of those two things is a good thing. But when every team is just running this whole attitude, I suppose, of let's just sign individual players and make them a team, it's just super frustrating, because I don't think it's a smart decision. And I don't really feel like it makes all that much difference to sort of build up your brand, as it were.
So I don't think it's even EU centric either. I think this definitely is happening in NA, and what my brain kind of immediately wants to jump to a conclusion is like, this is like an immediate response to like a new game in like post COVID, where it's like, we need to make every best investment 100%. Like the budgets in each country are completely different. Like, I not gonna speak with any kind of like expert's tongue on it. It's very bizarre on why they are, and maybe there's definitely economic reasons why that is, like just specifically to EU. But it seems like every investment in this game needs to be like spot on, or like it'll have knock-on effects to like everything else that goes on in their esports kind of portfolio, that they need to get this to work. And I don't know. I don't know exactly why that is. Is it COVID? Is it, this kind of esports, not recession, but condensing that probably needs to go on, just because everybody's getting paid crazy numbers and it's just not sustainable, and we keep getting funding and we can't ever pay it back because we can't get people to buy things. So it's, I don't know if it's a bigger picture thing. I don't know if it's COVID. What do you think, Brian? Like, is it COVID? Is it something bigger?
I feel like it's EU are always just naturally slow to get into the picture of this kind of way. Ignition events, I think, is going to push it a little bit more, just because, you know, we had 20,000 people watching Party Pirates and Fish 123 earlier, 2 unsigned teams, and there's 10k now watching G2 and Nip, which is, you know, that says enough, right? Like, it's not just like, I get that, like, even prize pool money is such a drop in the ocean for some of these, like, organizations and stuff, but yeah, COVID's not going to help, but even, like, as somebody that, like, works in that, like, content creating space and works with like brands all the time, it is just a fact that EU has like a third of the money that NA gets, just because NA is like the center of the universe when it comes to those kind of like deals, certainly with English speaking countries. You know, it is what it is. So I think there is a sense of EU teams wanting to bide their time because they know the talent is going to show up. But it is that juxtaposition of Sinatra saying that he's getting paid the same as like 150,000 a year, and yet, you know, for breaking, it's just like, we'll do this for as much money that pays our bills.
Please pay me.
It's just like, it doesn't need to be a lot. Just give them that chance and let them build it up. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. But like, at least give them a chance. I just hate this sort of idea that there's organizations wanting to, they're just overlooking them completely. That they may, you know, entertain the idea, but just not really considering getting Fabrican right now as a full roster, because that's not the way to go. And it's like, well, Fabrican is still one of the best teams, if not the best team in the region, even though they weren't in WePlay. I don't think that's really, like, I don't think them not getting to WePlay is like a penalization for them, like going through those qualifiers. Like, I'm not going to take marks of them. I'm not going to take marks of them for not qualifying. Like, I'd say 7 out of the 8 teams that were 5 out of the 6 teams that were invited to the WePlay event wouldn't get through qualifiers. You know, like it's a shit way of going about it. But yeah, it's like, I want to see these teams signed. I think they're deserving of being signed. As far as I know, there's a lot of organizations that are just waiting to see what happens after Ignition, whether there's going to be a league, whether there's going to be more of a third-party scene with stuff like maybe ESL getting a chance to do stuff, even though they probably won't. But the Blasts, the DreamHacks, them getting a try at this, putting bigger tournaments together.
Flashpoint.
Whether there is just, Flashpoint, I think is, you know, giving interest in it at least. But we all know that there's going to be a league coming of some sort. So it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of those LEC teams are just like, oh, well, wait. We don't need to worry. We're doing LEC. Like, we've got that following. We'll just wait for these teams to stick it out. But the environment isn't sustainable for teams like Fabrican and Party Pirates. It's not forever. One more loss in the tournament, they could be done. Like Meadow or Leo Deads or whoever could go. I'm gonna go sign for like Vitality. They're putting together a team and they've given me an offer. It's clear we're not going anywhere. And it's just like, I would hate that to happen, but that's the more likely scenario to happen at the moment, unless these teams take the plunge and go, we're going to sign this full roster and maybe not pay them as much as we would do Mixwell or Ardis, for example.
Sure.
But we're going to give them this platform to try.
Yep. I agree. I think the future in a lot of these like new untested games for brands that kind of have like built themselves and they're kind of out of like the name recognition, like we need to like really get ourselves out there phase, needs to be like, and I hate to use Immortals as the only example, but I think Immortals, I think C9, I think these teams that kind of give the nod to somebody and say, okay, build this roster, build me a roster, don't build me like 2 or 3 people and then like they like go play with somebody else and like we just loan them out, but like build me a roster, you're in charge, go. With a small budget, you're not blowing, you know, for lack of a better term, your load on just like this crazy roster that like goes bunk in like a month. Sure. It'll grow with you. It'll perform, hopefully, as long as you have like the right gatekeeper to kind of like use a buzzword. And yeah, you'll do fine. Like a Fabricant, like like what Ryan's saying, like you can take some of these European teams, even if you're an NA org, like who's to say you don't want to reach out into Europe and spread a little bit in there? Not a bad
Liquid,
look.
apparently, yeah. Like right
exactly.
NA, well, they're sort of hybrid, aren't they? With
they're kind of all over the place.
But generally that, and it's just you set healthier expectations, really, because when you look at some of the NA teams, like if Cloud9 don't win tournaments, it's not that much of a big deal. Yeah, if they go out in groups, that's pretty bad. Like, and there's a lot of showings of why people would put question marks around them. But Fabrican got third place in an Ignition series.
It's a big deal.
Like, would Ninjas in Pajamas be happy with that? Probably. Would someone like Liquid be happy with that? Would G2 be happy with that? Probably. Like, this is a team that can consistently get there, and it's just like it's super frustrating to see that versus, like, let's say like this Prodigy roster that got into WePlay.
Yeah.
Where would they have done? Like, if they would they beat Fabrican? Probably not. Like, they're not a team. They don't play together. They don't have that coordination. I don't think they have a coach or a manager or anything. So it's kind of like, we just got to make it happen. We're pugging it at this point. Or you can have a team that's looking out for each other that has bounced back and is trying to innovate the game. It feels like it's just like a Sign Fabrican episode, but it's like, it's crazy to me coming from an Overwatch background where we know all of these teams that work together and innovate the game in such a way, to see that not being rewarded, especially in the EU scene, where in the very early days of Overwatch, that's where it all came in. It's kind of like, to an extent, the old IDD QD roster playing together and doing so well, and then them all being cherry picked for different rosters. Like, that would just suck, because you wouldn't see that team get signed. Yeah,
I won't say to the same degree as like the old like,
got like
hubris. They did kind of pop off, but I definitely like. The message is very clear that it's like, should Prodigy be invited to these events if they're going to continue pugging? Probably not, because it's a complete gamble on what you're going to get and when you're going to get it, because these players are getting exported left, right, and center. So like, you don't know what Prodigy is going to show up. Should Forza be invited to this WePlay event? I'd hate to say it.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, because I just saw this on Twitter, actually, because I sort of poked about it, really, because it's like, you had Force and Prodigy being invited to this event, and they went 0-2, and both of them lost to the two teams that qualified. Like, that's a really bad showing for them. They took up a slot that Fabrican should have been given, or even Bonk should have been given. It's kind of those like roles. And Jerome Coupes, who's like the CEO of Prodigy, was kind of like, teams should not invite Prodigy for future invitationals now. But it sounded like, he said, to be fair, the Prodigy initial roster was the NIP call, like it was at the Vitality.
Right, 100%.
Just like, they deserve invited to an event, but I don't understand why WePlay invited NIP and Prodigy in that case. Like, invite Prodigy running NIP or the NIP roster. It just felt a bit like...
I've got to assume it was like before any kind of deals were in place.
So.
They had this in place. It was just an unfortunate...
Because you would invite the old NIP still, right? Like... If you're doing an EU centric, it's not like the world's best thing, but it's NIP.
See, exactly. That's where I go with John here, and I say, okay, if teams are going to sign, like orgs are going to sign teams, those like you need to kind of like legitimize your event by like bringing in the G2s, bringing in the NIPs, bringing in the Navis, like give this right name recognition, and people are going to get interested. I don't know that a lot of people are going to be super interested in need more DM, at least not yet. Right?
No,
I think you have to like recognize this.
Ironically, they have a bit of a following. Like, they have a real big like Hungarian following. But
totally,
I get the idea.
You get the message though. Okay.
Yeah.
But I even said like something I said with Valhalla that we did, Ryan, is like we had so many really talented teams that are showing up now. Party Parrots, Fabrican, those are just two that come off the top of my head. But who was following? Royals was another one. Like those are all teams now that like are like, oh yeah, I would tune in probably to see those. Like, oh cool, let's start. But Valhalla was like a little bit ahead of their time there. They needed the pull of like a C9 core, even though they weren't that great, or they needed a pull of like a little bit larger team to go, oh, I want to see, and then that would have, I think, done a lot to, the viewership on it just overall, and especially just in early esports in general was so streamer centric. Even post beta. So I don't know. I think I want to keep talking about this, but at the same time, I do want to talk about a few of the events that we had. This is a really good convo, but let's talk about a few of these tournaments that have wrapped up or are ongoing. So the first one, the Vitality EU Open, was a fun one. I got to watch a good chunk of this, actually, at the end of the day. G2 Esports coming in big, and Prodigy, and that was with Prodigy with the NIP core.
NIP core, yes.
Yep.
Prime, Looker, Hip.
Or the hip core, however you want to, depending on what timeline you're in. Fabricant in third and fourth with Party Parrots. So,
and again, I don't want this to be the Fabricant like drum beating episode, but like you look at that, you look at the competition that they've placed. They take maps, they do good. Just give them a chance. Just literally, and it's not like there isn't any kind of like Swedish like orgs in Europe that aren't looking for a team or like don't have a Valorant squad yet. It's like you have a lot of history in CS with a lot of Swedish players doing real good. So it's like if
super easy to change up players, isn't it? If
yes.
it's just a full Swedish speaking roster, then it's like, all right,
cool.
We're dropping Zipan. He's burnt out. We
sure.
don't want to play. Let's get some players from like your scene and stuff like that. Like that's not as hard as it would be for like Need More DM if they send like a full Hungarian roster. Yep. That's going to be more of a challenge to get. Like, actually, it depends if they speak Russian or not. I genuinely don't know. I know it's more like towards the CIS regions. I don't think Hungarians speak any form of Russian. And maybe if you could have Lithuania, because that's no penky. But generally, point being is that like Swedish is obviously very much a gaming language that replacing individual players is not going to be too hard. But yeah, totally. Like this was a full open. There was no invitees. It was an open qualifier. Every person I think deserved to be there. There was some awkward stuff with Apexis' group with potentially some awkward teams doing some pretty unethical stuff, but I'll say no more. You get the general gist. Yeah. Kind of screwed over the bracket in a similar way to people complaining about the no penky stuff, which is a totally different topic. The point being is that every team earned the right to be there, and Fabrican still got top 3 and barely lost to Prodigy. He went down to the third map, overtime with the old overtime settings because it didn't work that weekend, apparently. It happens. And like I mentioned before, Prodigy, they could just play with absolutely no pressure on their shoulders. Because if this team goes out of groups, fuck it, who cares? Like Hip's still going to NIP, Rhyme and Looker are still on that roster, Por and Turbo are just playing for the fun of it, So they're playing with no fear. And when you have those kind of players just kind of dicking about a little bit, and Fabrican are, sweating, like if we lose this, we're going to lose all of our players, like Fabrican still held their own. They beat Party Parrots, which I still think is one of the best teams in the region. Again, they got third place. Like it just.
What more does this team need to do?
Yeah, they could have won this event, and I still think organizations like Fnatic and whoever will be like, I'm not sure.
I don't know yet. Valorant's kind of new.
Yeah,
it's getting to a point where I definitely side with you. Like, there's a great chance that this team like just falls apart. Some people get signed elsewhere just because like they're going to get individual deals, and we'll never get to know what Fabrican like looks like as a team with some background. Maybe in a month or two, you do have to change out a few players for whatever reason, right? Not going to speculate on that. It's not performance based, nothing like that. Just the way that the world works, the way that motivation happens. Maybe that happens. Who knows? But like this core has potential. Where are the orcs? It irks me to no end. I think I agree with you 100%. I think Party Parrots is easily one of the most dangerous teams. Not to mention because they seem slightly crazy. Yeah, I don't know why, but they seem to, at least in this event, they definitely haven't done as much in We Play, but the amount of force buys, the amount of Guardians bought, the single Vandal buys, how much more kind of weird and off-putting and unorthodox, and the raw potential of these players. You have SSK doing well. You have Shao just popping off, absolutely having a stellar tournament in We Play. Check that out if you haven't. And then, Angel obviously coming in from a pretty solid, I wouldn't say legendary but a veteran of CSGO. This team, not to be trifled with. So again, Fabricant beating them should say something.
Both sides, like I mentioned, I don't think it's a case of, 2 weeks ago we were saying the Party Parrots and Fabricant are the two best teams in Europe. I don't think it's kind of like, oh, now that G2's in the fray, it's like a big gulfing class between G2 and Fabrican and stuff like that. I don't think it's that cut and dry. It's kind of like, this is the honeymoon period for teams like Ninjas in Pajamas and G2. G2 will lose to somebody eventually. Is just, part of life. It's like memento mori, almost like.
Sure.
Eventually we will. How does it translate? Like, eventually we will die is memento mori or something like that. But it's like, eventually we will mold and lose, something like that.
Joe, I will say that G2 is a good example of a team that was piecemealed together one by one. They had a couple people. I think they had a couple of players on Prodigy that played together for a little bit, but I think
they did kind of just hit it. Like this is like one of those. I think this like is a good like middle ground between you and I, where it's like Mixwell has like a fantastic like big presence in CS, comes from CS, is like a veteran of that space, and then you have Artis, and you have Patatech. Like these are like your young prodigal rookies on top of or on the shoulders of somebody like a Mixwell. I think it's like a very like good roster, has like the best of both worlds. And that's fine. I think that's great. But I think like the amount of like, not capital, I wouldn't even say money, but like you've really got to act quickly to kind of get those. Because I think the only other one that we could maybe even like speculate on is maybe like Big Clan's roster that they're throwing around with like Godby.
Yeah.
Like that one could be okay. They've only got 2 players so far that were announced today. But when you have those big CS names come in, you can kind of not afford in terms of just like the budget or like strictly cash sense, but you can kind of put somebody in to kind of meet us both ways, where it's like, okay, you have that big CS presence, you have that big name in Godby, and then you bring in, a core from, I don't know, whatever team in Europe that like they deem deserving. You bring them in, you get best of both worlds, and you can still have success, have the brand, get all the clout.
I guess the point is that up until G2, none of the players really played together. Mixwell brought in some really great, talented individual players. There's a few I think that might have had some overlap and stand-ins, and I can't remember who it was, but I think that they played a little bit together on Prodigy, as we can call like the T1 org waiting room.
Artist Mixwell.
Yeah.
Really.
So, like, it's. And I think what we're both kind of talking about is that we're both talking about when our strategies go right. And then when we're talking to each other, it's like when those strategies go wrong. And that probably doesn't help either. But yeah, I mean, overall, like G2 was insane in groups. Like,
yeah,
G2's group stages were just stupid. I think, what was it, like almost plus 50,
like plus 44.
Plus 44. Yeah. Round differential. It was pretty handy. Did they?
And they're just swinging there.
They did drop a map to Fabrican, right?
I think they dropped a few maps in general. I think they dropped a map to Party Pirates.
Oh, yeah,
I believe
and Prodigy.
In groups.
Yeah.
They did drop a map to Fabrican. That like they're not infallible in any way. I think like if I remember correctly, Haven is kind of like a pain that they're kind of seemingly overcoming. I don't know if that's maybe a Party Pirates thing, but I think if memory serves me, they're slightly struggling on that. I don't know. G2, like it with this event and like how strong of a showing they had, I like my head immediately wanted to go, oh, okay, like they're the best, like they're completely like separated and stratified, like they're way out in front. And the more that I look at it, the more I side with Ryan and say like, okay, maybe this is just like early honeymoon, like they're going to do well. Like, let's give them a couple months and like return to this question. I will say, however, they are incredibly fun to watch because they just swing their massive schlongs around and play like a G2 team. Like if there was ever a team for G2 to build, this is it. And they play like it. Like they just take these angles. They don't, it's not that they're not showing respect, but like they just don't care. Like they'll hold that angle for a good hour and know that you're going to peek it and then kill you. And it's fun to watch because it's so like not chaotic, but like loose Loose is a good term.
It's the best way to describe them, really. I think you have those sort of three main styles of play that's happening, where you have the G2 and the Prodigy of NIP, like both these teams now, playing very no pressure, very free, fluid, free-forming. You have the opposite end of the spectrum, which is very structured, very deliberate plays, which I think is more like Fabrican and to an extent Bonk, I believe, where, yeah, you're not going to see Latex just run off crazy and get like a 4K all on his own. For the most part, they have those individual moments, but that's because they put themselves in those positions to begin with. Like, certainly on defense, you know, you run onto a site, there's the Cypher there, there's Meadow waiting for you, and he's able to kill everybody and trip everybody up, literally, with some of his utility. Yeah, you have players like Zipan that can go off and do crazy stuff, but his team enables him to do that too. They help him get those picks instead of everybody going, right, I'm going to go do this, help me, like they would on G2. Like, we have those comms, so we know that, like, David P sometimes will be like, I'm going to push mid, and Artist's like, all right, I'll help, you know, it's that kind of thing. Whereas for Brigitte, very much like, this is the role I'm playing, Zipan wants to make a play, I'm going to help him there, it's more constructed. They struggle with each other, I think. Like, Fabrican struggle with teams that just don't have any rhyme or reason. Because they just can't read it and they don't know what to do in response. But those freeform teams struggle with what Party Pirates and I think Need More DM do, which is like a hybrid of the two. Yeah. They are structured, but sometimes they just go like, fuck it, I'm just going to run down mid. Like you have like BZK or BZT for Need More DM, with the operator will just do some stuff that you don't expect. And that's really hard to read. And then suddenly the team that's trying to play free flowing, like G2 for example, is suddenly like 8-0 down, and then they start panicking, and then they start arguing in team chat and stuff. So like, that's kind of like the three main ways of playing. I think compositions and tempo of play style and how they execute, I don't think that's really as applicable yet, certainly not from speaking to coaches. It's just general, like, how do they want to like play themselves in these kind of games? Like, how do they want to control what they're doing, as opposed to where are they playing, how fast are they playing, what agents are they playing? It's just more, are they just doing whatever they want? Are they playing the same positions every single time? Or somewhere in between the middle? And that's super interesting to sort of see how that comes together.
Because it can change too.
Yeah. I do want to go. I want to go across the pond for a second. I want to go to the Pulse Invitational. And this one is pretty interesting. Gen G taking first place, Cloud9 in second, Sentinels and Terrific in third. So Joe, you're excited, man. Tell me why you're excited.
This is interesting. I feel like I can slightly hand wave and dismiss the C9 TSM upset. I will kind of, you know, sidestep this. Hold on. Hit me with the boo. That's fine. I will say it felt like this was like the big event where like everybody had like judge boners, where everybody's like on Haven playing judge on A short, and it's like that's a change up that like you really have to think about like what to do. And I think as the scene has progressed since then, like not maybe a month ago, we're starting to see like a massive influx in like B and C site takes, because like nobody wants to deal with like any kind of like judge debauchery on A short, because it's like a very good entry point into that site. So I think C9 and Tens in particular,
bull judge,
sure,
like a bull judge and a judge.
Sure. Title of the show. I think Tens like hit that on the head, executed really well, and obviously that last play that kind of sealed their victory felt very
apt.
Yeah, it wrapped it up in a nice bow. It was like, oh, okay, like we have to look at this. I don't think it's like this crazy thing we need to nerf. I think it's just genuinely a good gun, good style, fits the operator or the agent that is using it very well, and we're gonna have to figure out a way to deal with it or mitigate it or just attack a different site, which it seems like that's like the running strat at the moment to do. So I think that this is like an upset. I think it shouldn't take away, like Ryan was saying earlier, away from TSM's previous dominance. I think they are a very good team, but I think this could be the start of C9 really getting the wheels moving with Tens and starting to kind of solidify and sign these players and having a good roster. I think C9 starting to come up. I think Gen G continuing to be just a top tier team in NA. Happy to see that the former NV core of Together We Are Terrific, now Envy, is continuing to do good. FNS, just an absolute legend. And Sentinels continue to impress me. I will say, like, yeah, I had my doubts, but I still think there could be improvements. But gotta give credit where credit's due. They're definitely showing up. Rant over.
So okay, so I'm gonna pose this because we discussed this 2 weeks ago. So TSM went out a little bit earlier than expected in the charity. The charity tournament, and you and Yiska were very, very, very quick to be like, it's for charity.
I put the brakes
they
on
have
that
myth, blah blah blah. You, your mom. You know, very vulgar.
All of them.
Very, very, very vulgar.
PG-13 episodes.
Attacks on myself and my family.
Only you.
Only from me, right from you, angry old mean Volamel. But so they went out early in Gamers for Equality with Myth. They go out earlier than expected here in the Pulse Invitational. The teams that performed decently well in the Gamers for Equality thing did relatively well here. They didn't. Are you really just gonna throw a cap on charity plus Myth done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't. I
just want to make sure.
I wouldn't give a lot of stock in that.
Sure.
I will say you have to give credit to C9 here. I wouldn't take too much credit away from TSM in general for having underperformance. I think, you know, having a sub at a charity event to kind of, you know, raise money. I think that's the time where you want to bring in them streamers, you know, get the vibes high, get the views high. That I'm about that. Yeah, I'm cool with that. Charity, cool.
Fair.
This one, if you were to criticize TSM's placing at the top seed in NA, I think this would be the one that I can't argue with. I think I could explain why they lost and say, hey, they didn't, you know, they didn't capitalize on Haven. They got caught by the judge. It is what it is. You got knocked out on quarters versus a good team.
Molding. Like they just looked like on tilt the whole time. Even on the Ascent, their Ascent was really bad, and I think
they're just bad.
The damage was the damage was already done. It felt like it was. It's just teams have that kind of game. I don't think TSM should really sit on it too much. I don't think Cloud9 should get too much credit because certainly some players in the whole tournament, like Shinobi namely, just left a lot of question marks on. Yeah. At this point, like if Cloud9 are trying to put the best boss roster around tens, like I agree with Relics, I agree with Mitch to an extent. Like Shinobi is the only one that's kind of like I think he's the shot caller, but I still don't really think that's the good doesn't outweigh the bad there. I don't think personally. Like
interesting.
I don't know if it's kind of like he's already been good in scrims and like he did some pretty good stuff with Yodin on the Ascent, but that's pretty much all he did. So I don't know why. I'm just more surprised, I guess, more than anything, that Cloud9 aren't having a more aggressive approach and go, we don't want this player. But the fact that they keep sort of trialing and standing in the same players, it's kind of like the David P approach for G2. But if David P just was like, had one game in 5 where he was absolutely popping off and the other 4, he was just not really, he wasn't bad, he wasn't good, he just wasn't really there at all. That's the only, I don't get why they're, fawning over Shinobi when a lot of other teams would have gone, you were terrible, get out. You know what I mean? That's the question mark.
I think, and that's the thing too, right? Is we don't really have a ton of access into the internal trial structure, how they're bringing people on board, what that process looks like, what they value there. But this is very much just an elongated G2 where, G2 filled out the roster over 4 weeks, right? Yeah. We're obviously much
still
longer than
not done. Yeah.
Sure. No, David P's still not signed.
Right. So we're still at the point. C9 is we've got 3 out of the 5 pieces now that are officially signed, and it's far less expensive to probably to do it this way than it is to sign somebody you don't want. Like, you're right, Shinobi I don't want to say shouldn't be there because that is way overly harsh and I think dismissive. For me personally, I don't know.
It's just ignorant, really. It's more kind of like.
But
there's a reason. I feel there's just got to be a reason, but I'm just not really seeing it.
I don't see it.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't reflect on like the stats and scoreboard, and even like in the POVs that we see. I totally agree with that. Yeah. But like, so I don't want to say like Shinobi shouldn't be there, but like I understand why they haven't signed Shinobi yet. And invites, like I understand why like we're gonna wait, like keep playing with us, like let's see where you go over the following weeks. As much as we want to think that like Valorant is this like aged game that all these professional players have figured out, like it's just not the case, right? There is so much to learn. People's learning capacities change a ton. I mean, there was was it? I want to say it was Valhalla, which sorry, I feel like that's the only tournament I have like really good recollection of ever. But Valhalla, where Angel like didn't look great, and like look at him now, and like he's clearly a cornerstone of their roster. And if that's a poor illustration, that's fine. What I want people to take away from is it's totally feasible for players to not look super awesome immediately in these tournaments, and over time, even a matter or a course of over a few weeks or a month or 2 months, develop into a player that looks is starkly contrasted to how they looked just a few months prior.
Yeah,
okay,
I'd agree.
Right. Goodbye.
I
Done.
Generally agree. I just haven't seen, and then that's again like if he is the caller, okay, like you don't need to necessarily like frag out of your mind to call. It with Angel, I think like you could. I think like the CS caliber and like the CS veteran
in my back pocket, because that feels like
a
bad
but
example.
I generally agree, because these games are so loose and like individual focused, where like you have one bad event that doesn't like doom your career. That shouldn't doom your career. Like this isn't the style of game to kind of eye test that way. Like you really have to give them like a good stretch of time. That's the problem with Shinobi for me, is like we've seen him at a few events now, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not getting any vibes. It'd be a different story if like I knew, okay, like if he is calling, okay, I can understand that. Like maybe that's why the trial's taking so long, and in terms of him, because they're like, okay, like the calling seems to work. Like they're having this big event at Pulse, could be a good sign for them. Throughout this entire discussion, I kind of was just like, what if we could have poached FNS? FNS and tens? Ooh, now that's the one I'm talking about. That's that spice. That I think C9, like, I think they're doing it. I don't think there's a right way, but I enjoy that the way they're doing it's very slow. It's very methodical.
I think it's a way
that
that should lead to success, which ultimately is the right way. Like
hopefully
the way you get there, the way you get to success is less important than the fact that you found a process to get to success.
It's painfully slow, but they're getting there slowly, and
now's the time to be slow,
starting
probably.
to come. 100%, totally agree. So, Pulse in general, I think, while I wouldn't necessarily give a ton of, I want to give credit for the C9 upset over TSM. I think their 2-0 victory over Together We Are Terrific, now Envy, definitely a big win. And then obviously Gen G is still a top team. Like that's a tough ask for anybody in NA at the moment. So the 0-2 loss there shouldn't be.
How do you feel about the signing of Together We Are Terrific?
Fantastic, great,
like,
beautiful,
sweet. I feel the same way. I'm surprised it took them that long.
Big moves.
As like Together We Are Terrific is it's the NA Fabricant, right?
100%. Yeah. Like you're gonna get value here, guys.
Why do I have to keep looking at the Valorant logo on your Liquipedia? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But it's like it's just the fact of the matter that Together We're Terrific's results are worse than Fabricants, which is even more like I'm not thinking about it as like, you know, like Mouse Spars becoming Gen G. Like that was that should be enough of a showing of you can just sign teams and that can be successful. I don't think there's been any cases where full teams have been signed and they look awful because of it. Like, if anything, the teams that have maybe underperformed in some areas are the ones that are just made up of individual players, right? So, I think it's a great sign, and I'm glad that Code 7 got picked up in a similar fashion too. it's just a nice hybrid, I suppose. Because I'm really excited to see how FaZe builds out their roster too. Like it could be done the one or two ways. So yeah, like I'm glad. Like Together We're Terrific deserve to be signed for sure. But I feel that's just the difference in the nature of the like. It seems that it's just like Stonks. It kind of feels like Bitcoin when it sort of ramped up in like 2018 or whatever it was.
By the way,
where
I love giving back to my community. Here's my here's my Bitcoin link on Twitter. Everybody,
Jeff Bezos should sign Fabrican.
There you go. Elon Musk is in.
Pay him in cryptocurrency only.
What? So I'm definitely a little bit ignorant on the EU side of things. So for Fabrican, like what are the organizations that are there in EU that are like,
good question. I don't really follow like the LEC all that much, but I'm just going to quickly like Wikipedia them to see what teams like, because there's got to be some that are like Counter-Strike, for example, that are not in there. Like it'd be cool to see Astralis, but it's not likely. I don't think. You know, you have Fnatic, you have Rogue,
Fnatic's
Misfits,
Rogue,
Excel. Like Fnatic
Misfits.
is definitely like the Mardi Gras for any team to get signed for.
And they have a ton of history with like Swedish teams. It seems like
they
are
a Swedish organization, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like really, like more than anything. They used to be very like British based, but now not so much. Team Vitality, they organized an Ignition event. It would surprise me if they're like looking for like a roster and stuff like that. But yeah, like that's kind of what I sort of take from that. Shulk as well, bizarrely, SK Gaming, Na'Vi is another good one. Let's have a look at like DreamHack EU, CSGO, Wikipedia, because there'll be other ones that I missed. Astralis would be another like pretty interesting one if that ever happened, but not likely. Complexity has gone to the other side, like to NA as well, which is another one. Big's involved.
For freedom.
OG is in, Endpoint, Heroic, Mad Lion, so
where's EG?
So none of them. None. There's not really
EG's
any. There's
around here throwing cash around.
EU orgs left.
There's definitely EU orgs, and I respect the hell out of an NA team that like wants to branch out into EU and like build an EU like foothold with Fabrican. I think EG would be a great team to do that. They seem to be like interested in like rebuilding and like coming into their own into esports. So like throw some cash at the wall, sign Fabrican. You can win some events. You can get some top placings. You can build your name out in Europe. I think that's just a good look, personally.
Especially now when it's just like, I don't mean to be rude to the unsigned teams in NA, but there really isn't any lineups that haven't been signed now that are like, I would consider worth picking up for a big organization. Like in the nicest possible, like Echo 8 and stuff were cool in that, but I think if it was like, sign the top 2 or top 3 teams in Europe over like 15th or even like 20th, that's probably been really harsh to Echo 8, but you get the idea. Not a top 10 team, right?
No.
Like I think it's easy to make that decision, really, and I think you get a lot of fans for signing teams like Party Pirates and Fabrican from the scene. I think it shows that you care about the up and coming talent, and I think it's just generally like a good sign as opposed to, oh shit, let's just sign whoever we can. Who's left in NA? Let's just sign them. Like I feel like some of the organizations are doing. I think that just makes you look more irresponsible and helping out the scene.
Sure.
Yep. I agree.
No, man, this is a fun episode. First of all, I learned a ton. I love these shows are just an opportunity for me to learn. You know? Just learning, chilling out, having fun. Ryan, dude, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. I really appreciate it.
Coming in clutch.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like, we only got to speak to each other like 2 minutes at BlizzCon, I think it was, because I remember seeing Volamel being like, "Oh, hey, it's nice to see you guys. Well, we gotta go."
Yeah,
Sorry,
go.
like, I can't remember what it was, but it was just like really bad timing. But yeah, it was nice to catch up.
Yeah,
just real quick as well. Like, I get just what the whole NA versus EU question. Quick, I'm practicing my answer for this because I get asked it a lot. Okay. If there was a LAN event happening right now, I think TSM would win it. But I think the top 10 teams in Europe are much stronger than the top 10 teams in NA.
I would agree.
The strength across the board in Europe
fair.
is so much stronger, but they haven't got the individual strongest powerhouse team.
I agree. I think TSM probably has to be considered the best team in the world at the moment. We'll see what happens with PAX. Maybe they continue to fall. Maybe the charity event wasn't a meme and John's right after all. We'll have to see.
Maybe.
But,
I play my hardest when it's for charity, man. That's all I gotta say. I play my hardest when I know that Hearts are on the lines, you know, for the kids, right?
We'll see. But I completely agree. Like the top teams in Europe are tough to wager, you know, over NA. So
it's fair. Chat, big thank you to hanging out. Again, we record live at noon o'clock at twitch.tv/KickedTripod on Fridays. If you want to come join us, say hi. We are so close to partner on Twitch, and every concurrent view really helps us do that. Big thank you to Adriac, Butter Emails, and Chris R34444, who gifted 2 subs for subbing to the channel. We really appreciate it. As well as RyanCentral, guest of the show, subs to the channel. What a guy. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much for the subs, and please do leave a 5-star iTunes review on iTunes. It's helped us a ton. When you type in Valorant now on podcast, we show up first or second. That means a ton to us. So thank you so much for doing that. Ryan, for you, just kind of shout outs of the week. Where can people find you? What are you working on? Give us the deets, how we can stay in touch.
The goal is to cast an Ignition event over the next couple of months. I don't think it's out of reach, but it's a challenge right now. I think there's a lot of big casters wanting to get in, so having that clout as a caster is good. But yeah, for the most casting stuff, it's all going to be centralized around my Twitter at RyanCentral_. But I would definitely check out HitScan on YouTube. We try to do news videos as they hit. We've tried out a lot of different format with content with Overwatch, but there's something just nice, I suppose, about just having 2 guys sit down to talk about a patch or to talk about an interview with Morello, those kind of things. So if you just kind of want the layman gaming approach of here's the news, here's the no BS opinions of 2 guys that follow the game quite closely, that's where you're going to get it. And pretty much as soon as the news happens too. I think we're very much on the pulse when it comes to that kind of thing.
The Spike Drop Podcast YouTube channel is subscribed to 3 channels. The Valorant channel, I think my channel, and then not Joe's, not Yiska's, but HitScan. So there you go.
You could have said Clickheads then. It would have been like a, all right, we're going to go, thanks, bye.
Yes. It was the same, right? Those are the same channels?
Yeah, same channel. Even though the name's not the same, it's still the same case. I love those guys, though. Lefree does great and stuff, so it's nice to see us, the Overwatch boys dominating the scene when it comes to that, so, you know.
For sure.
No complaints.
For sure. Overwatch has always been really special with the content creators, and even though we never had the most saturated content creation ecosystem or whatever, the people who did it and did it well, I feel did it really well. So it's really great to see him in Valorant.
I think it's fairly saturated. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we rebranded real quick for sure. It's just 2019 didn't have much news. When news hit, we're 10 channels all making the same, thumbnail, same title and stuff. And it was just we're still going to do that with Overwatch 2. That's something that we're all looking forward to. But
yeah,
Valorant's out. It's a fresh new thing. We haven't covered a new game in 4 years. We wanted to do this game justice. And then eventually we'll slow down with Valorant as that starts to get into more of a chill cadence. And then when Overwatch 2 comes out, obviously our focus is going to be there. And then other class-based shooters down the line and stuff too. I think we've had a bit of freedom there. And honestly, I could see us doing all sorts of FPS games. Even Borderlands 4 could be on there, considering I did it on YouTube, right? So
nice.
The world is our oyster, and that feeling is so liberating considering we were called RyanCentral for 4 years. So the future's looking bright, regardless of what happens.
Well, hey man, congrats. You'll always have a sub in me. For sure. Joe, what about you, man? Shoutouts for the week. Where can people find you, man?
Kind of quiet this week. All my content's done and out. Did an interview with Emil from Fabricant. That should be up on GG Recon by now.
Nice.
A couple profiles from the We Play Invitational. Looking at some Overwatch stuff. And next week we'll see what happens. A little bit of Overwatch, a little bit of Valorant with PAX. I think that's sometime soon, so maybe previewing that. But yeah, stay tuned. Go watch them games. Check up on We Play. Check up on the Overwatch League. Support your boy RyanCentral, and I'm gonna shut up.
Your boy. As for me, you can find me everywhere at KickedTripod, twitch.tv/KickedTripod, youtube.com/John Horstman, because I can't change the link for some reason right now. And Yeah, nothing real big coming out. I've been so busy. So Katie and I have been taking Japanese lessons, and we're finishing Japanese 1 now. And we're so like it was so much fun. We're so excited. We're gonna keep going with it. But it took so much time. We made a mistake, and basically the choice was we could take the intensive course, which was 5 weeks, versus the regular course, which was 7. So we had to essentially elongate or shorten 7 weeks of content into 5. Or we had to wait until September to start. So we're like, let's go for the faster version, and let's see what we can do. And our necks are just whiplashed at this point. And even our teacher is like, the second round is going to be a lot easier, but the first one you're learning you're learning hiragana and katakana. You're learning like 2 different writing styles, and then you're learning numbering systems, and then you're learning vocabulary on top of that. So I haven't gotten to do as much on my YouTube as I wanted to, is basically what I'm saying. But I did get a little time this past week to redesign the tactical crouch stream, so that was fun. We're gonna get out of here. Big thank you to everybody for hanging out. Have a great one. Find us everywhere. Just search for Spike Drop. You'll find us. Spike Drop Valorant if you want to be super sure that you get the right thing. Other than that, we'll see you next Friday for another episode of Spike Drop. Bye.